There we go. Hi, it's Bill with Conversations in Foundational Health. You know, I often interview people that are outliers in what I consider the world of medicine or insurance rules. Well, I've got a rock star with me today, Shelly Prosko. I've met her years ago, and I've just been following her career and absolutely find it phenomenal because she is a physio, she's a yoga teacher, she's an educator, she's an author, and I'm sure like a lot more. She probably climbs mountains and all that. But what I'm really psyched about is the way that she is focusing on compassionate self-care as part of practice, as part of treatment in our healthcare world. So I want to say welcome, Shelley. It's so glad to see you, and I appreciate you taking a moment or two to come join me on my little YouTube podcast. So
I
welcome.
love it. I love it. Thank you. It's so good to see you. And yeah, just I'm really excited to be here. Here we go. This will be fun.
Well, I hope so, and I hope it's going to be of service to people. I'm really trying to disseminate information that I don't think is available to everyone. I think we get stuck in a model of you go see your doctor, they write you a prescription, you go to physical therapy, you have your half hour heat, ice, electric. But what you're doing, in my words, is revolutionary. Um, this is the missing component. I think in our whole world generally, but as part of healthcare specifically. You know, we're the world is tough enough and we don't have to be tough on ourselves as well. And I think you can bring a lot of healing, multi-dimensional healing with compassionate care as, a component of that. So what I was wondering is if you could just talk a little bit about how compassionate self-care affects chronic pain, because I know that's another part that you really focus on is chronic pain and pelvic health. Where do you see those things being affected by, the addition of compassionate care?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. So, as you said, this is something I'm really passionate about, and I could probably take about an hour to answer that. So, let me get centered so I can, be as concise and clear as possible. But I think I'll just start with reminding everybody, or maybe this is new for some people, that compassion might mean different things to different people. But let's first define what we mean by compassion. So in the literature, sort of the agreed upon working definition is to notice when someone is suffering or struggling, and then having the motivation to alleviate that. And that then is followed up by some sort of an action. So it is a behavior. It's not just the feeling of kindness towards someone or something, right? It's actually doing something about it. Or the decision may be not to, provide space. And that compassion includes yourself. So that's where it's not like compassion and self-compassion are two different things. Compassion includes the flow of giving and receiving compassion to yourself. So compassion is offering that to somebody, offering compassion. That so in the context of pain care, the clinician offering compassionate care to the person in pain. And also the other flow is the person in pain receiving the compassion. So that's, you have to be able to receive it as well. Sometimes there's barriers there. And then the third flow is the giving and the receiving to yourself. So as the clinician, being self-compassionate, which is going to affect the therapeutic outcome and the alliance there, and also increasing that self-compassion within the person in pain. So you can see here now I've already opened up, wow, there's a whole bunch of different things to talk about. So I think, to start with, let's talk about the flow of compassion for the person in pain. So I think at first glance, we say, that just makes sense, right? If we're more compassionate to the person we're serving, you're going to have better outcomes. It's just better. So that's not, I think, real mind-blowing, but it is good to see that the research does show that the more compassionate care that we can give people, particularly in the context of pain care, that not only helps improve the person's pain, or can potentially help improve the person's pain, but it also can help prevent burnout, believe it or not, from the caregiver.
Okay.
So it actually fuels the caregiver. And then also that can just increase patient satisfaction. It can help calm the person's nervous system and open up for a chance for that nervous system to then be more open to new movements or new ideas, which can then be a portal to help reduce the pain experience.
So
So
it's a
in general,
relationship.
yeah, exactly. And in general, like it's a good thing. But the one thing I found was really interesting when I was doing research for the book chapter on compassion in pain care. What I thought was really interesting. Okay. So there was this one fascinating study that they had 10 people in the study with chronic pain. And you know how in pain care, we're always trying to help people improve their own self-care, because we know from the literature, it says people with chronic pain, if you can make some different choices, potentially, change maybe some things around your sleep, or we always tell people do
Right.
this, that, or just make healthier, quote unquote,
Right.
choices
Right.
that would help you. Well, it turns out in this particular study that people found it really challenging to make those changes. But once they felt what it feels like to receive genuine, loving, compassionate care, felt seen, heard, validated, loved, only then could they take the action to care for themselves. And from the
Yeah.
study, some of the things these people were saying were, they didn't have the self-worth. Like you had
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, like they felt, hard on themselves. And when their pain isn't getting better, or they fail another treatment, or, or the therapist is trying to help them and it doesn't work, they start to feel like it's their fault.
Yeah.
And so it's just this idea of when we can increase that understanding, that empath, sort of cognitive empathy for the person, they then can take steps towards self-care. So that is
Right.
one interesting aspect. I'd like to talk more about the different things, the different outcomes that self-compassion can help, unless you want to chime in here if you have any
No,
thoughts. I've been talking
absolutely.
for a while
I
there.
I I want to get your message out to the world because I honestly believe that this is a bedrock issue. I think when you feel loved and understood, you have a safe place to fall. Even if it doesn't work out, you have a foundation. And in my practice, I don't treat a shoulder, I don't treat a neck. I treat a foundation. And I try to give a strong foundation so that I tell people all the time, if you have a bad foundation, it's like building a bridge with steel girders, but you're putting it in bad cement. No matter how much strength you get in this place or that place, that bridge will fall if the foundation isn't strong. So it sounds to me, and I'm taking my own words, but it sounds to me that you're giving somebody something they may never have had before, a place to feel heard and seen and recognized. And sometimes recognizing their pain or recognizing, I do a lot of work with fibromyalgia patients, and across the board, I just try to make them feel heard and listened to and felt validated because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't, especially with that diagnosis. You can't see a thing, you can't point to one thing. But I'd absolutely love to hear more about that. That's great.
Yeah, and I just love what you said there about the foundation. And I use that term a lot in the courses and the conference presentations. And I'll say compassion, the foundation of pain care. So I
Oh,
use that,
perfect.
yeah, because it truly is. So yeah, so a little bit more about now the flow of self-compassion and what the literature tells us, but not only just what the science is saying, but this is what I've seen as well in my own personal life as I started learning about self-compassion and started seeing there's different questionnaires and things, screening questionnaires and things that you
Hmm.
can take to kind of see where you're at on the scale. And kind of found several years ago when I was getting into this that I was quite low on the self-compassion. And so my own personal work has corroborated with what I'm about to share with you, what the literature says, and then also the patients that I work with, I've seen.
Awesome.
So I'm just going to read, excuse me, some points. So what we have found is when we increase our self-compassion, or another way to say it is when people are low in self-compassion, they're low in some of these other things. And then when we train self-compassion, which is good news, we can train it.
Awesome.
Some of these things can improve. So believe it or not, when we train self-compassion, the more compassion and care and love that we give ourselves, it can help to reduce things like anxiety and depression, and even help reduce the stress response. It has been shown to help improve our emotional resiliency and decrease things like shame, self-criticism. And this is what I think is fascinating. Well, there's lots that I think is fascinating, but it can also help reduce our levels of disability and even our pain severity. So this is where it comes within the context of chronic pain. So they've done actually research. There's not many, just a handful. We need more to make it more, powerful research. But it does seem to suggest some of these preliminary studies that, yeah, if we train self-compassion and it goes up, that can actually help reduce the pain experience and reduce our levels of disability, and even increase our capacity to cope with the pain, increase our pain self-efficacy, like our capacity to believe that, yes, we can manage this, we have the confidence. And then this one, which is what I've personally really experienced, and sometimes there's a misconception around it, which is the more self-compassionate we are, the more likely we are to try new things, the more likely we are to try again after we've failed, because the perfectionism goes down. So there's a misconception that, well, we could be too self-compassionate, then that will be self-indulgent, or it'll reduce our motivation. But the research actually shows it increases your motivation, because the root is coming from a place of genuine love and concern for yourself. You love yourself so much that we actually take steps towards sort of meeting our needs and self-care. Now, again, I want to be careful here, because we have to be mindful that there's no flavors of blame here. Meaning, sometimes it is hard to care for self if we don't have the resources, if we don't have the social support. So there's just keeping in mind that self-care is not an isolated thing.
Right.
So
But would you say it helps build resiliency?
Yes,
Okay.
emotional resilience. So people with higher self-compassion are actually more likely they're better at dealing with adversity. They have better coping strategies. The stress response is more favorable to a favorable outcome, and improves that emotional resiliency, which is that exact thing, that bouncing back. So when things get really tough and just overwhelming, which that's life, we can't get rid of this stuff. These aren't magical things. Life happens. But if you have higher self-compassion, you have a better chance at bouncing back and navigating those really challenging, tough times. It's like
responding to them.
Responding to them, and it's like a warm hug. It's like a support you're giving yourself. So I think those things are really fascinating. And then as far as self-compassion within the healthcare practitioner, that is a whole other set of literature that it can help reduce burnout and help improve our own positive, health outcomes and so forth. And it actually, okay, one more thing here. So there's this idea of compassion fatigue. So we think as healthcare professionals, let's not give too much compassion because we'll get tired. Well, what many of the people who are experts in this area, and the researchers, and I agree with them, will say things like, well, there's really no such thing as compassion fatigue. And Gabor Mate talks about this too. Many people know him. It's perhaps fatigue. You definitely might be burnt out, or you might be fatigued, but it's not from compassion. You may have empathic distress, meaning you've emotionally taken on people's, you're not able to regulate yourself. That can lead to burnout, this empathic distress. And that what they've seen in the literature, the changes in the brain, they've done compassion training with healthcare professionals and empathy training. And the compassion training, individuals, the brain changes in the fMRI are such that it actually fuels people to care and concern even more for others. And it makes them feel, it gives them energy and it fuels them and it gives them the inner resource to care. Whereas the empathy trained clinicians felt more burnt out. They felt more emotionally distressed. And in fact,
Well, that
over that whole week, they even had to, sorry, I'm not letting you get a word
no, no,
in.
no, no.
But even
That's
that
okay.
whole week, I'll hold on. Yeah, I don't want to forget this. So
No,
that
no,
whole
I
week,
enjoy your passion about it, and that's what makes it real. That's what I want to share. So please, please.
so, but just this last thing, the even the week long of this empathy training, they had to actually do for this group of clinicians, they had to give them a week of compassion training because they were so burnt out and
Ah,
so dysregulated after so much of that empathy. So that's another sort of rabbit hole to go down, the difference between compassion and empathy. But just wanted to say that it's this compassion training that can really help fuel us to care more for people in pain and give us the resources for a career of longevity.
well, it seems to me that the empathy is a one-way street and compassion is a two-way street where you're giving, you're taking, you're receiving, you're being aware of yourself. When I think people tell me I'm empathetic, well, and I am, but it always seems focused on that other person as opposed to um, a dynamic flow of energy where I'm watching myself as well as them. And that, I
Oh,
guess, is the compassionate part. Or, you can be empathetic, but you got to make sure that you're self-empathetic. You're not draining or taking your resources. Well,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I am, like I said in the beginning, I believe that, compassion is one of the missing things in our entire world. We could all just be a little bit more compassionate. And remember, you don't know what's happening in that other person's world or in their life. You don't know what hardness they've had or things they've suffered or even things they've achieved. So let's have a little humanity. And that comes down to what
Humanity.
healthcare is supposed to be.
Yeah,
So
humanity and humility. And that
yeah,
idea of getting back to the empathy piece. Empathy for me is, well, there's different types. So you can have a cognitive empathy, which is really, really important for compassion. So empathy is a primer for compassion. But the
okay.
emotional empathy, we don't, there's some, Paul Bloom is a psychologist and a researcher in compassion and empathy. And it's really interesting. He talks about the arrogance of empathy. This really stuck with me. And to think that we actually can completely feel what another is feeling is something for us to pause and actually consider. So I love the idea of no, we don't know exactly, and we can have full compassion for the person. I think that's really hopeful because sometimes when maybe we're struggling to connect with the person, we may have different values. Compassion is easy when it's easy, Bill. It's
Yeah,
easy.
yeah.
We all want to be kind, right? We all want to be kind. And when we connect, it's easy, but that's not always the case. And for clinicians too, we're not immune. We're human. We're not immune to that. So when it's challenging, when you're trying to work with someone and for whatever reason, we're just not connecting, there's hope because we don't necessarily need to have empathy in order to offer a compassionate response.
Right.
So I think
I
that's super hopeful, and empathy is not sufficient. It's neither sufficient nor essential for compassion to emerge. So you could have empathy, but you may not necessarily be compassionate. And sometimes people use empathy in negative, manipulative ways. But on the other hand, maybe you can't really totally understand and you don't have that empathy, but you can still have compassion. So I
step up
wanted
to
to
the plate.
share that because I think that's important, especially in this world we're in too right now.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of, every time you've said compassion, you said sharing compassion. And it just seems like that. I was struck by your interview with Gabor Mate, which he's another rock star. And you were interviewing him and you said, you did a talk and I heard you say to yourself, you're trying too hard, you're pushing. And he was saying that to himself. You got to, sometimes you got to remind yourself. And I think his phrase was, wherever there is tension, it requires attention.
Love
And
it.
even in himself, I thought that is somebody that's not, he's teaching this stuff on a worldwide level, but he still has to remind himself every day. That to me is compassionate, that you felt compassion for yourself. Hey, I got to remember this. I start a gratitude list every day before I get up and every morning, every night when I go to bed. And at the end of it, I'm always like, Great Spirit, remind me that this throughout my day, when I'm in traffic and that guy cuts me off, or, that's where the rubber hits the road. Well, um, so I had another question about, are pain and the perception of pain the same thing? And I'm wondering, a lot of times with my patients with fibromyalgia, I try to help them understand that we can change your perception of pain, sometimes through breathing and meditation and just awareness. But where do you see compassion helping to delineate that? And do you even believe that's true, that pain and perception of pain are possibly different things?
Yeah, I like the term relationship myself, like change your relationship to the pain. I think when I hear change your perception of pain, this is, we're getting deep into some philosophy here. I just keep it sort of simple, and you can change your pain. So pain is an experience. It's not just a sensation. We know that pain is both a sensory and emotional experience.
Hmm.
That's what the science is telling us. We know that sometimes if we may not be aware of the emotion, like you get a paper cut or stub your toe, you may not realize there was an emotional part there, but there always is. So knowing that pain is an experience, we can change our pain. We do have the capacity. A lot of people, don't, even just that basic scientific fact is
Hmm.
hard sometimes to understand. So that would be the first thing. So your pain can change because pain is an output. So everything is a perception,
Hmm.
really, right? Like our
Yeah.
vision, everything we experience is, and that's getting deep into that neurophilosophy
Right.
that, what I'm doing right now, talking to you, hearing your voice, all the sounds in the room, and people who are watching this, what they're seeing on the screen, and the colors, those are all just outputs of our brain, and pain is part of that. So but the good news is that we can actually change the pain,
Right.
and then we can also change our relationship to the pain. So that's how I'm seeing your question,
Okay.
is that the actual pain can change. And even if the pain doesn't change, which happens for many, many people, so your pain might not change. And what you had said is the perception of your pain maybe,
Right. Right.
but you can change your relationship with it, which might help to reduce your suffering. And so what I like to say with people, because as we've been doing this for many, many years, just sort of saying one or the other isn't always helpful. So let me give you an example. Trying to share with someone that we can, let's say I'm talking about self-compassion, and with this increased self-compassion and not being so hard on yourself and so forth, and giving them examples and experiences. They have to
Hmm.
experience it to believe it. So actually giving them experiences to say, okay, we can shift here your relationship to this pain you're experiencing. So if you look at pain as my fist here, this is pain, and
Hmm.
then your body, all these big sort of circles around, or all these different activities that you're doing, and then the pain just gets bigger and bigger, and this fist gets larger and larger, and all these activities and all these little things, they seem to get smaller and smaller because this pain just gets bigger and bigger. So what happens if we don't change that pain? We just keep that there, and then we can start to change your relationship to the
Okay.
pain. And so these other areas of your life can grow, like on the inner resources, love for yourself and so forth. And that can maybe help reduce that suffering from the pain that's there. People can understand that, but I don't know about your experience, but most people get a little annoyed with that too. So you're saying I'm going to just keep this and have to
Right.
change my relationship. So it's the idea of, and what the good news is that what the science around pain tells us now, we've known this for just the last 20 years, is that we can use any aspect of our existence to change any other aspect of our existence, including the pain experience. So
Brilliant.
it's a yes and approach. So yes, let's see if we can use self-compassion to so that help reduce the struggle. So for example, the self-compassion can help you reduce the anxiety around your pain, right?
Yeah.
It can
Well,
help
and
you
that's
reduce the
huge.
stress. It's huge because, and we can reduce the anxiety, the stress response, because those are inputs that make the pain experience worse. When our nervous
Yeah.
system is in that hypervigilant state,
Yeah.
that's what's happening in fibromyalgia and persistent pain. So if self-compassion can help reduce that anxiety a little bit, can help us manage that stress response a little bit, it can help regulate us, the emotional resiliency.
Yeah.
That two things, it can help us in the moment if that pain is just like stays there, it can help us
Yeah.
reduce the suffering, and sort of a collateral a
I
side
like
effect of might actually be that the pain does change, and that's what the literature shows, is the pain can reduce from these self-compassion practices. So
I like
I
the
like,
and.
yeah, so it's, yeah, just to recap, it's both changing your relationship to the pain to help you, you want to get through this moment with a little more peace and ease, maybe even joy. And we can also potentially change the pain. And this is what I love so much about the the approach that you and I both take on looking at the whole person, and not just,
Yeah.
we're not treating, like you said, we're not treating diagnoses or body parts. We are addressing the whole person within their environment that happens to have these set of symptoms and diagnoses.
Yeah.
But
But it's
and
their
I
it's the entirety of their experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and we're meeting them with our humanity, right? Rather than our tools. So we have our tools with us, but we don't
In
lead.
service of our humanity.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, we don't lead with them. I got that little tidbit. I love that language from Frank. I never know how to say his last name. Ostaseski. He's a Buddhist teacher, but he
Mhm.
talks about, as clinicians, we have all of these tools and different methods, and we just come. They're in our back pockets, but we come leading with our humanity, and then from there we can try the different tools, and that's the game changer for clinicians if you really think about that. You're not
Yeah.
leading with the tool, doing something to someone. Oh, I'm gonna fix this like a mechanic, and I'm going to do this.
Right.
Not the approach. That's not the foundational approach that
Exactly. And
we're talking
and
about.
really, I think our foundations, compassion is a great place to build your foundation, and then you have your tools to take with you. It's not like you're going to forget all those things, how to mobilize a shoulder or what have you. But if somebody's storing a lot of anxiety or chronic pain in their neck and their shoulders, you can mobilize that shoulder a lot bit more easily if you go through those processes of listening, of really experiencing them, of allaying their fears of the unknown. Because we're just like any other medical professional. You go in, you don't know who I am. There's some goofy guy whistling over in the corner, and now he's going to come yank on my arm. Well, how about if I introduce myself? How about if I ask your experience? How about I, get your point of view and treat you like a human, which I think is part of that compassionate interchange or relationship, as you said.
It is, yeah. And there in the book chapter that I have on compassion and pain care, there is um, it's a model basically, and
Hmm.
there are ingredients that prime for compassion, so that actually guides us and helps us. And one of those ingredients are like the awareness and attention of your own self first, and regulate, and then creating that safe space, listening to understand, not to
Awesome.
respond.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
exactly what you're saying, that primes for a compassionate response to emerge. You have to, be that aware, intent, and present, and regulated, and then that helps you better meet the needs of the person and have that perspective taking that you do need for
Right.
compassion to emerge.
Well, and I do, we were going to give you a chance to, tell us all about your programs, but I love your book sitting right over your shoulder saying yoga, science, and pain care. Because I
Yes.
think when people think of yoga, they don't think of science. I think they think mystic, stretchy. It's not for me. I can't. But I like yoga science in pain care. I think that's brilliant. And I really want to say thank you so much for this conversation. I don't want to hog up all your time. We could talk for days because, you know, in the future, I'd love to get another time to talk with you about the pelvic floor program. I think that's essential. There's so much shame and fear around that, but one of the most life-changing things you can do for a person. It's just, that's a whole nother topic of conversation. Um, but I do want you to give you a chance to, let us know if you have any programs, any seminars coming up. I will tell my audience that, you can look on TED Talks, she's there. You can look on YouTube, she's there. She's prolific, and we're so glad to have you. I did have one more question for you though, because I always ask kind of a fun question. Are you team poutine or team cheese nacho? What? If you could only choose one, poutine or cheese nacho?
Oh gosh.
I asked Amber if she would do
Oh.
primal scream therapy or roller derby.
Okay, what did you just say? I wasn't listening to that last part. I was thinking of poutine or
When I
cheese.
when I interviewed Amber, I said, "Are you team primal scream therapy or team roller derby?"
Oh, right, I
She's
heard
like,
that. Yeah. Okay, I'll go poutine. I'll just say poutine.
it is a good choice."
Yeah. I am Canadian.
Exactly, indeed. Well, please, if you have any programs, just let us know, and we will put all the connections, her website, her YouTube page. I am assuming you have a link tree that, or some way that they can find out everything you're doing. But anything you'd like to highlight right off the bat?
Yeah, I think, just go to my website.
Okay,
It's PhysioYoga, PhysioYoga. So physioyoga.ca. It's
of
Canada.
course.
Yeah. And everything, I've got all the icons on there for my Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all that. So that's probably the easiest. I'm Prosko Yoga on the social media, but yeah, just go to my website, I think. And then you can browse. You see all of my I have a lot of free webinars. So you see under my offerings. So I got just
Nice.
like just like I've got a YouTube channel and lots of free practices, free presentations, a lot of podcasts. They're all on there. So I think if you browse the website and then you can see my upcoming events. So I do have some, live online events. I've been getting back into person a little bit. So you can always see on there. And then I have some pre-recorded courses. I have things both for healthcare professionals and for the general
Oh, awesome.
population who are looking for help. Yeah, so I would say just do that. And if you want to sign up for my newsletter, you can see that on the contact page on my website. So everything's
How,
there.
excellent. Well, that's awesome. And thank you so much, my friend. It was really a pleasure. And I do think you're doing groundbreaking work. And I'm happy to try and spread the message because I do think it's very important.
Well, it's so good to see you, and thank you for all that you're doing and for this YouTube podcast you're doing. And just, I know you so want to give value, and you do give value to all of your listeners. And so how about we end with just sharing with everybody something really quick they can do to stay
Sure.
present and aware. So anyone
Absolutely.
listening, something practical, and you'll see this is going to take less than 30 seconds. Anytime throughout your day, just go to your breath and just notice, oh, I took a breath in and I'm taking a breath out. You don't have to change it. You don't have to do anything. Just notice, okay, I'm breathing in. I know I'm breathing out. And that's it. You
No
can,
judgment, no story.
yeah, just it helps you get present, check in, and it can tell you a lot about your state. You might be a little bumpy or rigid in the breath, or maybe
Yeah.
maybe it does and make you feel like you want to take a sigh. Maybe you feel like, okay, I'm kind of up in here. You may notice all kinds of things, or you may not. That's okay too. But that's it. Just every now and then, if you can just go to the breath and just check in. So that's simple.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is so fun.
It was fun. Great to see you.